I love parenting. I absolutely do. I love parenting. I love my kids. I love interacting with them. I love the challenge of it. And I love learning from the process of making so many mistakes as a parent and then growing and getting better. Just finished my workout. I finished listening to the recent podcast that dropped with the Huberman Lab, Dr. Huberman, and his guest Becky Kennedy. And I highly recommend it. It was just like 6 days ago, came out. Thought it was great. I'm gonna go check out her book next to see what happens there. But I loved it, and I was gonna just break down a few of the insights I got from it. Maybe a little bit of a recap if you haven't watched it. This is some good stuff here. And then a little bit of my own insights just to add on to that. And then afterwards, if this sounds good to you, go check it out. Gotta catch my breath. I literally just was lifting weights and then sat down to record this. Okay. First thing is that she talks about your job as a parent, and she says some different things. One thing she says is that your job is to make sure they feel safe and that they exist. They feel like they exist and that they're safe. And that relates to the two action steps, which is setting boundaries and empathizing. And so I love this because I think the part that I would add on is that I feel like it has a real masculine, feminine quality to it. She doesn't mention that, but masculine being setting boundaries, laying down the law, letting them be, or having them be safe, and then letting them feel safe as well. Because I feel like that's kind of the masculine protector role. And of course, people freak out with male-female roles these days, but without getting into all of that, I think it really is that kind of masculine role to say, hey, these are the boundaries. And then the feminine being that empathizing, really connecting, like, oh, I totally get that this isn't what you want right now. You don't like this boundary. It hurts. It doesn't feel good. And in a way, maybe that's what we need a little bit more of for our political world. And I'm not going to go on a political tangent because that's not something I do on YouTube. But wouldn't that be interesting if the way the government worked was with this kind of boundary and empathy kind of, I'm just having this thought right now. But at any rate, the point being that a boundary is something you do to set a limit, and that they're not always going to like that. Most of the time they won't like it. And then you're empathizing with those feelings that come up. And a lot of times, and this is something I get from Janet Lansbury too, who also is amazing. You got to check her out. They didn't mention her in the podcast, but also worth checking out, is that a lot of times they get all this pent up anxiety, tension, emotions from their day, all these stresses. And then when you set the boundary, that's when they get the opportunity to release their emotions. So it's actually a healthy sort of moment for them to have all these intense, strong emotions with you being able to hold the space for that and just empathize. Getting back to the point then, so for me, the masculinity, and this is where I had even more kind of insights in the sense of laying down the law, the boundaries. Now, what she says about boundaries is her definition of boundary is something that you are going to do that does not matter at all what the other person's going to do. And I think that's a great definition, by the way. I mean, it doesn't say the whole story, but as an action step, an easy action step to remember, if I want to set a boundary, I just need to do something. What can I do right now to take care of this situation? And I'm going to do that. And it doesn't matter if they like it or not. I don't need any response from them, because what we want is our kids to do things. But what we're really in control of is what we can do. And a lot of times I ask myself, well, what can I do about this situation? And the answer is actually like nothing. Like, I can't force my kid to feel a different way. I can't force them to stop yelling. Like, I mean, unless I put my hand over their mouth, which I'm not going to do. What am I going to do? What can I do? And a lot of times the answer is very, very little. But a lot of times there is something I can do. And the parallel there is that in the sense of the law, and I'll throw out these little Latin terms here, via negativa and via positiva, whereas the negativa is the limits, what you can't do, and the via positiva being what you should do. So you should do this, you should do that. And I'll be honest, I want my kids to do things. There are some things. You should practice piano, you should clean up the table, you should help with some chores, you should go to bed on time, You should. But the way that humans work best is when we set those limits, what you can't do, what you shouldn't do, with an actual response. If you do that, I will do this, that creates an incentive not to do that. Then human creativity is such that we come up with wonderful ideas of what we can do that are within those limits that you may not have even thought of yourself. And this is just, I mean, this has fractals and fractals and fractals, this concept right here. So there's only so far I can take it right now. But the idea being that the law and the markets, the law being the boundaries of the marketplace. Hey, you can't cheat each other. You can't lie about things. You can't use force to steal something or intimidate or coerce. The law being the container, and then the marketplace comes up with all these ideas, which is the kind of Adam Smith invisible hand coming up with great creative ideas of what we can do. All right, so that was a long tangent, but the idea being that this masculine force is the setting boundaries. If you do this, I will do this. If you keep screaming and yelling and stuff, I'm going to pick you up and we're going to get in the car and drive home, or whatever it has to be. Or if you can't play with that toy safely, I'm going to take it away from you, and then do it. And that's something I can do, and I will do, and I do. And I don't have to be emotionally disturbed about it. I don't have to think, oh, I'm so frustrated by this 2-year-old. In fact, if a 2 or 4 or 6-year-old is like frustrating you, you got to think to yourself. I think there was a comedian who talked about this. What am I doing? I'm arguing with a 6-year-old and they're winning sometimes, or they're like triggering me and frustrating me. Like this is a little kid. Let me get a hold of myself. I don't need to be emotionally involved in this. Just, hey, if you're doing that, which is totally understandable that you would try to push boundaries, that's what kids do. Of course, you're going to try to play with that in some unsafe way. If you're doing that, then I'm going to take that thing away from you so that you're safe. And that's creating this boundary container of safety. Now that's the kind of masculine, I think I covered that. The feminine then being the empathizing, the connecting, and that's where it's like really trying to get and understand their experience. Like, oh my gosh, I can totally understand. You really wanted to play with that. And that's so frustrating that I just took it away from you. And letting them have their emotions. I thought she gave great advice, because this is something I've gone back and forth in my head about, of like, then oftentimes they're really rude. The kids can be really rude afterwards, like in a disobedient and disrespectful way towards parents, which I don't like. I don't like kids being disrespectful towards their elders. But you know, they do that, and how am I going to stop them? What can I do about it? She talked a lot about ignoring it, but in an interesting way. Like, I think she kind of hinted at like ignoring it in a sense of like quietly and silently just being with it, like, you just insulted me, and allowing that kind of vacuum of silence and not getting ruffled and not getting frustrated to create this vacuum where the child's own conscience can kind of kick in, where they can be like, I just said something really bad, without like trying to shame them or something, but like just giving them the space to kind of realize that they just did something they probably shouldn't do. I like that as well. She also talks about saying, I believe you, as a way of really empathizing. I liked that one. She had a number of great tips there. So those are my thoughts. It was a little bit rambling. I added a few extra pieces in. Let me think if there was anything else she said. I'm going to definitely check out her book. Helping them feel safe, helping them feel that they exist. And that's where the I believe you part comes into the, like, that I am real, that these feelings are real, that my desires are real, and helping them to trust that. And it was a great podcast. Check it out. Hey, share this with a friend, and then share the video with a friend. Share the love, share it all around. Let me know what you think. Tell me, do you agree, disagree, whatever you want to say. Tell me that I'm stupid. I'd love it. See you next video.